The judicial branch has a problem. They have to deal with it, or Congress will have to do it for the courts. I welcome everybody to this very important hearing. And we're trying to confront sexual harassment and other workplace misconduct in the federal judiciary. December the 8th, 2017, news broke that 6 women who previously served as law clerks on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit accused Judge Alexis Kosinski of sexual harassment and other workplace misconducts. You know, we've had all these reports throughout government, and I suppose it's as bad or worse in the private sector. But of all places, you wouldn't think that it would happen in the judicial branch of government. Heidi Bond was one of those 6 women. She clerked for Judge Kosinski 2007 and 2006 and 2007 before going to clerk for Sandra Day O'Connor and Anthony Kennedy. In December 2017, following news reports, Ms. Bond published an accounting of her experience clerking for Judge Kosinski. Ms. Bond reported that on the very first day of her clerkship, right after taking her oath of office, Judge Kosinski clutched Ms. Bond's arms and announced with a smile to others, "It's too late now. She can't escape any longer. She's my slave." Ms. Bond, that's the end of quote. Ms. Bond tried to play it off as a joke. Quote, "I think you mean indentured servant," end of quote, Ms. Bond recalled. "No, I meant slave," Ms. Bond recalled Judge Kosinski, saying with a grin. Ms. Bond's account of the sexual harassment that she faced over the next year as a clerk for Judge Kosinski is harrowing. She described 3 occasions when Judge Kosinski called her into the chambers alone, showing her pornography on his work computer and asking her sexually suggested questions. Each time, as Ms. Bond reported in December, she felt disgusted and horrified. And while this was happening, Ms. Bond and other clerks like her felt they had nowhere else to go for help. Nowhere to go, just think of that. A place to go for help is a pretty elementary step in the process of reform. They felt like they were entirely at the mercy of their very powerful and lifetime appointed federal judge. This is how Ms. Bond describes her encounters with Mr. Kosinski. Quote, "When this happened, I felt like a prey animal, as if I had to make myself small," end of quote. Ms. Bond reported that working in such an environment took an emotional toll. Ms. Bond recalled that she, quote, "began waking up from sleep, heart racing, hearing imaginary double beeps summoning me to his office. I started not being able to sleep at all. By the time I left the clerkship, there were nights I would lie in bed and watch the darkened ceiling until I had to get up and go back to work," end of quote. On the last day of her clerkship, Judge Kosinski topped off a year of torment and abuse with a threat. He informed Ms. Bond that, quote, "The beauty of judicial confidentiality was that it went 2 ways," end of quote. Ms. Bond recalls Judge Kosinski explaining that, quote, as long as I never ever told anyone what had happened in chambers with him, he would never tell anyone what had happened with me," end of quote. Judge Kosinski apparently wasn't interested in controlling his law clerks just for 1 year. According to Ms. Bond's account, he wanted to have control over his law clerks long after they completed their clerkship. Judge Kosinski used confidentiality and threats to silence his former female law clerks, according to Ms. Bond. Ms. Bond, one of the two women to first come out on the record about harassment, faced as law clerks to Judge Kaczynski, has been remarkably courageous throughout this entire process by coming forward first, along with Emily Murphy. Ms. Bond has made it easier for other clerks in the future to feel more comfortable speaking out against judicial harassment. Because Ms. Bond, unfortunately, has experienced harassment firsthand from a sitting federal circuit judge, Ms. Bond is uniquely qualified to ascertain what changes could be made to prevent other law clerks from having a similar experience. On December 20th last year, nearly 700 judicial clerks and law professors sent a letter to Chief Justice. This letter took the entire judicial branch to task for its failure to prevent and address workplace harassment in the judiciary. And so without objection, I will enter that letter into the record. In his 2017 annual report, Chief Justice Roberts acknowledged that the judicial branch was not immune to the scourge of workplace harassment. The chief directed the administrative office to create a working group to examine the branch's practices and standards of conduct. Specifically, the working group was tasked with evaluating whether the administrative office procedures for investigating and correcting inappropriate behavior were adequate, and to consider changes that could be made to improve codes of conduct, educational programs as well, and complaint reporting procedures. Without objection, I will enter that annual report into the record. The chief and his team had nearly 6 months to draft a report and propose serious solutions to the problems of sexual harassment and other workplace misconduct in the federal judiciary. After the Kaczynski scandal and other allegations, it was a real chance to undertake reforms. But in too many ways, this vague report kicks that can down the road. It leaves to other part-time advisory committees the key task of formulating specific policy changes. It appears victims could be left wondering to whom they can report, with little instruction or transparency in the process, or a resolution. Nearly every federal agency has an independent watchdog guarding misconduct, and all federal entities, except the courts, have meaningful remedies, guidelines, and procedures for addressing workplace harassment. So it's time for the federal judiciary to catch up. Ms. Bond submitted a letter to the committee responding to the working group's reports, and further, without objection, I will submit that to the record. I'll highlight some of the observations Ms. Bond's letter makes. She identifies certain practices that go hand in hand with workplace misconduct. She then suggests several recommendations on how to respond to these precursors. These recommendations are valuable and specific. We've heard similar comments from other law clerks who have spoken to the committee. I urge members of the working group to read Ms. Bond's statement in full. I was equally impressed with Ms. Santos' recommendations for improving the working group's report, and I look forward to hearing her testimony here today, and I thank her for being here. I want to thank the brave women who spoke out against this harassment, both publicly and to staff on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Speaking out against powerful federal judges in a system that doesn't always protect victims takes tremendous courage. That's true even in the other branches of government. So I shouldn't just say that's the judiciary. Being a whistleblower or saying something's wrong, sometimes you ruin yourself professionally. And it's too bad when people just want to be patriotic and have the government do what government's supposed to do and then be punished for it. How can you run a government of 3 million people if you don't respect what people say are wrong and not punish them for it? But because of these women's bravery, we can hopefully begin to make real significant changes to these powerful imbalances that allow harassment to thrive. You probably know that Congress recently enacted some changes to a legislation I got passed in 1995 called the Congressional Accountability Act to further equal the playing field between the victim and the person committing the crime against that victim. I would like to recognize Kendall Turner, one of the law clerk representatives who provided recommendations to the working group. While I was disappointed in the working group's report, overall the report did make some useful recommendations. In particular, the group recommended extending the time for initiating EDR claim from 30 to 180 days, expanding the scope of EDR plans to cover interns, and requiring judges to report harassment. I was also encouraged by recommendations to revise the judicial conduct rules. But the working group report fell short in 8 different ways, and I'm just going to give a sentence on each one of those. First, the working group did not include any current or former law clerks on its panel. Second, its report is exceedingly vague concerning the pervasiveness of sexual harassment in the judiciary. Third, the report did not set any time frame for judiciary to implement recommendations. Fourth, the report gave little specific guidance about how the judiciary should amend its code of conduct. Fifth, the report did not recommend establishing a national reporting mechanism, so it leaves victims no other avenue except to report to chief judges of their local district or circuit courts. This is a major issue because law clerks may be intimidated by reporting to a local chief judge instead of an independent national office. Sixth, the working group gave few specifics about the administrative office's new Office of Judicial Integrity. Seventh, the report doesn't create a formal uniform complaint process. The Office of Judicial Integrity will merely provide advice and counseling to clerks and court staff. Finally, the report gave no apology or even acknowledgement of what went wrong in the case of Judge Kaczynski, and it didn't indicate how its recommendations will prevent similar scenarios from happening. While some of the limited number of substantive recommendations contained in the report were a step in the right direction, the report has left far too much out. Since December, 16 additional whistleblowers from all across the country alleged similar experiences with attempting to report harassment, waste, and other unprofessional workplace misconduct. Judicial employees deserve to be protected from isolation, retaliation, and misconduct. They deserve an independent, impartial reporting mechanism that they can trust. With no clear established reporting or investigation protocol or independent third party to ensure all complaints are properly reviewed, judges or those in positions of authority are free to dismiss genuine complaints. In his testimony today, I hope that Director Duff will be able to provide the committee with a more specific and detailed plan on how the AO plans to confront and fix these serious problems. Finally, I still have not heard any apology from the judiciary to these female law clerks who Judge Kaczynski victimized. The judiciary declined to take any action against the judge following his resignation, and of course he still receives his federal pension.